to Sutures and Cents, where Tegaderm meets Top Line and Surgiflow meets soft costs. In the Ambulatory Surgery Center and Hospital Operating Room, we talk clinical to the business people and business to the clinical people. I'm Mark Copeland. He's Ryan Pistone. We are Sutures and Cents. Today's guest is Dr. Doug Wisor, and Doug is a longtime friend of the show. And today, Doug is going to talk about some things that Ryan and I found very interesting. Action items for surgeons, ambulatory surgery centers, their administrators, their owners, what they should be doing to handle sort of the new economy of healthcare. Ryan, anything you're looking forward to on this with Dr. Wisor?
Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway, and Doug's going to go into it in much greater detail, is he's going to explain how those individuals that you just listed out before can start running an actual business with their business, right? And how to think like private equity thinks, and operate efficiently, think creatively, and really just, you'll see during the thing, but it's just like, oh yeah, no, you should do that kind of advice, right? It's really applicable. It's really pragmatic. And it's stuff that they can start looking at today.
Excellent. So Dr. Doug Wisor is a physical medicine doctor in Richmond, Virginia, who sold his practice to private equity when he was 44 and eventually moved up and became CEO of National Spine and Pain, the largest pain group and practice in the country. So we'll let Doug talk about the economics and the business of healthcare and his own history.
Okay, so you are an ASC administrator, let's say, or better yet, let's say you're a physician owner, part owner of an ASC, right? Mm-hmm. What should you be thinking about today? Because this is where the market is going, and some people might be surprised at how it's already here, right? Yeah. Right? Like, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed, as the saying goes. So what would you, if you're an independent orthopedic surgeon, what are you sitting down and saying, I got to think about this tonight?
Right. So in line with what you said, I have an old saying, right? 80% of the world watches it happen. 10% goes and makes it happen, and 10% wonder what happened. First thing I say, it's like the Margaret Mead principle, right? It only takes a few amount of people to change the world. So, this is not as complicated as people make it, right? So, but here's the thing to first think about. Number one, if you're a surgeon or any physician, when you compare 2000 to 2020 on the rates that you're being paid professionally and adjust for inflation, reimbursement rates have dropped for total knee from $2,400 to $1,400 per case, which is about a 40% erosion. So if you have less money or flat revenue coming in the door, and you have higher costs to operate your business with inflation post-COVID, you are literally racing to the bottom, right? Like, so either you're going to make less money or you're going to come up with a strategy, right? And so, the first thing you got to be saying is like, look, take your head out of the sand. You're not an ostrich. Like, this is happening. This is real. This is not a drill, right? These problems are not going to go away. These trend shifts can happen fast. Like, if you don't believe me, when's the last time you stopped at Blockbuster to rent a movie, right? Like, it doesn't take long to be fiscally insolvent, right? With the math I just laid out. So I get that docs have been used to being the smartest guy or gal in the room their whole lives, right? I get it, right? But there's an old saying about Army leaders, right? You can be frequently wrong, and never in doubt. And that doesn't serve you well, right? Like, eventually you got to know the facts, right? And ask yourself if consolidation, whether it's private equity, hospital, or joining a purchasing group, I don't care what it is. What if you're wrong about the assumptions you're making? Like, you've made these assumptions about private equity, And I would contend that if you let your guard down, get the facts, like Mark Twain said, get the facts first. You can distort them any way you want after you get them, but get the facts first, right? And get rid of your preconceived bias and truly understand your current position in the marketplace. I think you're going to be better served. So that's the first thing that has to happen, right? Like, you got to face reality, pull your head out of the sand and take a look around. The second thing I'd probably do is sign up for a Becker's newsletter and podcast and really starting to understand your options, right? I mean, I think Scott Becker's done an amazing job at creating a platform for the dissemination of information, right?
I honestly don't know, in healthcare, I don't know that I've seen anything quite like it. And he started it in 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anything like it.
Well, it's like, there's an old saying by a business mentor I used to follow, Bob Proctor, right? You can become a world's expert in 2 years in anything, right? Like, you just got to dedicate that time to become, an expert. So I like to follow the advice of, Red to Brooksy and Shawshank, right? With a little tweak, which is, when it comes to your business, either get busy growing or get busy dying. Right now, like, with a flat business, as I mentioned, or declining reimbursement and increased costs, you're racing. So third thing I'd like, I'd consider is, if you don't consolidate, then your options are going to be pretty limited. Either just take home less money and shut up about it. Like, that's just the way it's going to be. And that's how you're being valued. Or you're going to be live in an affluent area of the country and you'll be like a Kerouac counterculture character and go all concierge, cash only, like, and let the general population fight with their insurance companies and you're out. Like, that's doable, but so few of us live in the kind of areas that will support that, especially in high ticket items like total joint, right? So ultimately, I think that there's a lot of things you can do right out of the gate, right? But the first thing you got to think about is, I don't care if, and I use this analogy all the time. I don't care if you're Amazon. I don't care if you're Apple. I don't care if you're the world's leading authority on cardiomyopathy, or you're the owner of Joe's Snow Cone stand. The same principles that drive your ability to increase your revenues and profits are the same for all of them, right? So first, number one is, every business has to provide service to others, right? I don't care what it is. If it's entertainment, if it's, medical services, if it's drop shipping, it's all service to your, customer. So you can, first off, provide more service, restrict access to your, lift up the barriers that restrict access to care, right? Open up on evenings. You could do Saturdays, right? The second thing any business can do is offer new services, right? Like, you can offer the breakfast snow cone or the late afternoon, espresso snow cone. Like, you can creatively start to add new services to your service offering. So, for example, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, but you don't offer, a foot specialist, maybe you need to add that, right? Or maybe regenerative services or whatever it is that's missing in the MSK plan. The third thing is, and this is really hard to do in healthcare, is you could raise your prices, right? Like, if you're a restaurant and your costs go up, you could pass that on to the customer, but you can't in a Medicare fixed pricing world. And the likelihood of you negotiating a better contract with payers is, negligible without getting big, right? So I think you're one place here where you might not raise your prices, but you could improve your rate of collection. And typically that is with the patient responsibility, right? You've really got to tighten up that whatever dollar you're owed comes in the door, right? Fourth thing is, you could provide the same service, but lower the cost that it takes to provide those services, right? That's very hard to do if you're small, right? I mean, you could lower your headcount, you could reduce your price for some, with vendors. But if you're small and you don't matter, that's really hard to get traction, right? And then the fifth way, and this is a really uniquely I'm speaking to around private equity, is you could create investor enthusiasm. You're not a publicly traded company, but if you were with a private equity platform, you could get deal arbitrage, right? And in my opinion, leveraging arbitrage is the most significant wealth generator possible to a physician today. So I know I can tell by the look on your face. Explain, please. So let me try to keep it simple, right? If let's say you're a surgeon, and just for ease, we're going to say you make $1 million a year, right? But you're going to sell 600,000, and you're going to take your new salary for doing the same amount of work is going to be 400. You're selling 600,000. You're probably going to get a multiple, I don't know, between 3 and 5.5 times if you're a solo practitioner, right? Like, So let's call it 5. Let's say you get 5 years earnings up front at a tax preferred rate, capital gains only as opposed to ordinary income. So it's really like 7 years of income in your hand, right? And then if you roll over some of that into the platform, right? And then the platform, well, first thing that happens is you trade at 3 to 5 times, but on the platform, that same amount of dollar trades at 10 times. You've doubled your value of your investment as long as your buy-in for the shares that you purchase at fair market value of whatever they've been set at by the private equity group.
And
So
this isn't
meaning,
the ASC, Doug, right? We're talking about, right? Or just
well,
a
this
practice.
could be, when a doctor owns an ASC, they sell a piece of their ASC typically, right? They might retain 20% ownership, 40% ownership and sell the 6. So the same rules apply, whether you're selling your practice or selling your ASC. You're going to go from a lower multiple to a bigger multiple just by joining the organization, right? And as long as there's a successful exit, you're going to harvest that upside, right? So I always say to docs, look, you could own 100% of Joe's Computers, or you could own 1% of Apple. Like, what's a better deal, right? Like, at the end of the day, the old days of building a practice, buying the building that it's set in, and then selling it to a junior partner for 3 times earnings or whatever, 3 times revenue, that's gone. Nobody's buying your business, right? So if nothing else, from an exit strategy perspective, you should be thinking about it. So, but I was 44 when I sold my practice, and everybody in the world thought, you're too young. That's the stupidest thing you could do. And when I did the waterfall analysis of how, staying the course, the increased expensive, nobody's going to pay us more for what we do. We're not, when I did the math in every way, taking the deal with upfront consideration and the ability to be investing side by side with a reputable healthcare private equity sponsor and exit again, it was a no-brainer in value creation, right? And we call that enterprise value, what you got up front, what you got on the back end, if you rolled again. So I was in my 3rd bite of the apple, as they call it, right? And I've seen it go really well, and I've seen some of the downside as you get bigger and bigger, and the challenges that not only private equity, but any management team has is when an organization gets big, right? It becomes more challenging, but you do have a louder voice with payers and with self-funded employers and with insurance companies and vendors. You start to drive value.
Okay, so all right, Doug. So applying those, you mentioned 5 things doctors should do. Using those same sort of value concepts, what should an ambulatory surgery center be thinking about and doing starting today?
Sure, right? In broad strokes, right? I mean, so provide more service. That could be optimize your OR schedule, right? Make sure that you've optimized the throughput. Now, most administrators worth their weight are doing that, right? But maybe there are downtimes. Maybe there's weekend hours. I mean, there's a lot of young physician surgeons out there who need OR time and who are getting, the ass end of Friday afternoon slots and stuff. Maybe you could go to them. And, on providing new service, diversify the surgical offerings. Maybe you sell a minority position of that ASC to a young surgeon, even if he doesn't join your group, but he's looking for a home to do cases, right? Make him a 1% shareholder, just like an SCA or SCD would do. There's no reason you couldn't bring them in. You just got to be careful on the referrals back and forth and all that. But, there's safe harbor protections and there's ways to negotiate. That is my only point. And I think, we offered, for example, many surgeons would come operate at National that remained independent. They didn't want to join the MSO platform, but they did want a home to do surgery. And we encouraged that. And some of them didn't buy in as owners. They just did cases. They just wanted better OR times. So there's ways to optimize throughput, right? And with that goes optimizing your pre-authorization process, right? You've got to get that patient who wants to become a patient on their timeline. If you're taking too long to get authorizations, or if there's any delays, you're leaking, opportunity out the door because they're finding someone else to do it. On the raise your prices, look, I think again, the big opportunity might be in value-based care arrangements with docs who are at risk and commercial payer, like self-funded employers who are looking to lower their overall spend. Look, I was talking to a value-based care organization that had 150,000 lives. And of their Medicare Advantage plan, 60% of their Medicare patients, they estimated that they spent about an extra $10 million in facility fees that they could have directed to the ASC in orthopedics alone. And if they could recoup just 20%, $2 million of that $10 million, it would have been a home run for that strategic development officer. So you don't have to move mountains to create these relationships, right? And the other thing is you could explore whether or not you want to sell whatever the required minimum 26% to an SCA or an SCD and piggyback back off their national contracts. Or maybe you kind of partner with a hospital system that has preferred ASC rates, and you can do the same work but get paid more for what you do, right? So it all comes into the raising your prices umbrella, right? You got to lower your costs through being diligent on your P&L, right? And that's tough because wage inflation is your biggest driver on the talent side, and you're competing against hospital systems who are using the cream they get on facilities to give signing bonuses and, pay above what was previous market rate. But look, at the end of the day, you offer a better lifestyle, right? And so you can be competitive. And so, and the other thing is you got to go to your surgeons. Not every surgeon needs the Maserati of scopes and, whatever equipment. And you got to leverage vendors against each other. Look, we would love to use your state-of-the-art whiz-bang tool, but we've got to get it competitive in pricing with what we're up against. You got to share some of the pain with us. Yeah. The other thing is like, look, you could increase investor enthusiasm by joining a consolidator, right? Like you could position it, as I said previously, and that could be done with private equity. There's plenty of them who want to absorb your specialty and your ASC if you're not doing multi-specialty, but there are, some who are just doing ASC conglomerations, right? Like Optum is,
Right. Okay. So that you gave us 4 or 5 things to do right there off the top of your head, which is excellent. Like I think you've given our audience plenty of things to ponder, and more importantly, I think that anything is a sense of urgency. That if you're not really thinking and taking action, now's the time to do it. And here's a couple things you can do. So, Doug, if these folks want to reach out to you and say, hey, I understood what you were talking about, but would you be able to come in and take a look at us and give us an assessment, right?
Yeah.
How do these folks get in touch with you? I know you're on LinkedIn, Dr. Douglas Wisor, Wisor. Mm-hmm. What's an email address?
I'm just right now using Doug Wisor, Wisor, MD, or no, Doug Wisor 68 at gmail.com, right? So I haven't even gotten time to go do a website because I've been so busy consulting by word of mouth, just talking to people and trying to help them. Look, and I'm not a McKinsey, consultant when it comes to rates, right? So I try to be reasonable and at least steer you through this, because at the end of the day, you're only as good a decision maker as a clinician as the information you have in your workup, right? Like you got to have the diagnostic test and the information to make good clinical decisions. Well, it's the same with your business. If you don't know where you stand relative to the market, you're going to struggle to make the right call.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to end it, by the most commercially clinical or clinically commercial person I think I've ever talked to.
Yeah.
So looking at my notes. So thanks, Doug. We really appreciate you taking the time. And I suspect we'll be reaching out to you again to talk a little bit more about some of this stuff.
Yeah,
so
maybe we can drill down in specific issues as topics. As you see there's interest in a more myopic focus, I'm happy to jump on, and always a pleasure to see you, my friend. And
same.
Stay thirsty.
Okay, so we knew Doug was going to be a great guest, and I just thought, for me, Ryan, he demystifies and explains so many things. But for me, the thing that I thought was most interesting was how he described how an ambulatory surgery center gave a bunch of great to-dos, but how an ambulatory surgery center should consider getting involved in value-based care with the primary care physicians in their area for like the right site for surgery, because it's the same surgeon, same surgery, same patient, different site, dramatic savings in cost. I just was I found that fascinating. I will be thinking about that for weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the joke that he made was, let's do it at the surgery center where there's not a 20% tax for being done in a hospital, right? And it is fascinating when I think of surgery centers that I've been in and how they operate. They're just way more efficient. That's the big thing I took away from this entire thing with value-based care. It's not It's not lowering quality. It's delivering on the same quality. It's doing that. It's just operating like a business, doing stuff more efficiently. And, those ASCs that can find partnerships with value-based, primary care physician groups, obviously, that's a no-brainer home run if they can make that work.
It was fascinating. Okay, thanks. That was our episode this week of Sutures and Cents, because the saying, all bleeding stops eventually, applies to both surgical patients and balance sheets. We'll see you next time on the next episode of Sutures and Cents.